Good morning. A little late this morning. It's 9:59 on the 31st day, Tuesday, the 31st day of May, 2022. And we are broadcasting. This is Mirador Television broadcasting from the White Hart Hotel in Lewes, where there's been a fair bit of traffic backwards and forwards this morning. It's a lively hotel. But we experienced a few technical problems. And me being me, I have to go a long way around to solve them. I'm Keith Hayes, and I hope that we will. Yes, we're trying to invite Fergus Woods into the studio. He's pottering around this morning. Pottering is a dynamic young man. I wish we were as dynamic as getting started today has been a bit traumatic, but not as traumatic as those people who went out to the airport today thinking that they would get away and out of the nonsense that is going on in our country at the moment. The fact of the matter is the airports are in just as much nonsense, absolute chaos. And this is reflected in the front pages of the newspapers. For instance, here is the first one. It's the Metro, and basically it says, "Wish we weren't here." A play on words, of course, is when we used to send a postcard saying, "Wish you were here." But those are the days when you went down up to Blackpool and gone onto the beach and had a little a toy bucket and a little toy spade, and you dug furiously away and built a sandcastle which the sea destroyed within seconds as the tide came in. Well, we build sandcastles a bit like that today, I think. But the Metro. Right, okay. We just had a note from Fergus that the link isn't working, so we'll try again. Well, let's hope that it works this time. Well, let's hope that we're going to get hold of Fergus. The system does seem to be a bit rocky this morning. I don't know whether it's because suddenly it's become very cloudy and dour outside. And that creates difficulties sometimes. Let's see whether we get some success. And we'll carry on taking a look at the front pages of the newspapers. Well, I said we would do that. Is, yes, yes, we got them. We got at least the headlines. If we haven't got Fergus at the moment, so the Metro. Wish we weren't here. And it's a play on the words from the old days when we used to send a postcard from paddling on the beach, and still people still call it "Wish you were here." And the Metro, tongue in cheek, is saying we wish you were here because this is absolute chaos at the airports. People being sent back from having waited 8 hours to try and get on board an airplane. The explanations that are being given are many and various. One is that a number of people haven't returned to work from COVID, and the airlines and the airport are short of personnel. Two, that the post-COVID situation means that many workers are still not back at work, that they are still busy. When I say not back at work, they're still busy being working from home. And I'm delighted to say, I'll just finish this off because the whole of the newspaper headlines this morning are, if you want to get away, the chances are you're not going to get away, because by the time that your turn came to board on the airplane, what you'll find is the airplane is on the way back. Right. Good morning. Good morning, Fergus. How are you?
Morning, Keith. Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Not too bad at all. Now, you have been busy the last 2 weeks. I hope it's because there's a boom in the wine business.
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah, a little bit. For various things, I've been busy the last couple of weeks. But yeah, it's been up and down, to be fair, over the last couple of weeks. But it can't all be sunshine and rainbows, really.
Well, we need sunshine for the grapes, don't we?
We do. Yeah. It'd be lovely if it was. Yeah.
What are the predictions for? I mean, I know that you need almost what's a perfect storm, so that it's a vintage year. But what sort of year are we going to have for wine this coming season?
Well, you don't really know, because the weather could change like that any second. So you sort of, at the moment, it's quite good conditions for the early stages of the ripening process, or at least the sort of flowering of everything, called veraison. And so it's sort of quite mild. It's a little bit, slightly warm. There's no real frost lurking about, so there's nothing to kill them, especially in the UK. So yeah, it's quite good conditions at the moment. Little bits of rain. It should probably do with a bit more, but yeah, it'll be okay. Yeah.
Now, tell me this, because we made some passing reference to it, but I think it's is it September, that there is a race to get the first vintage, first wine back, Beaujolais Nouveau. Is that race still on? And what's that all about? Why do they want to get that wine into the UK as fast as they do?
So it's the third Thursday of November is when it is, and it's just a tradition, really. It's the first wine to be released from Beaujolais, and first wine to be released in the whole of the world, basically. And so it's just a race to get the first vintage out of the door, basically, and who can try the first crop of the year, basically, or first wine of the year.
Is it just a matter of pride and internal go at one another, or is there any advantage of getting that vintage first onto the market?
No, I just think it's because it's the newest thing, and so it's just because it will be the first 2022 vintage. Let's take this year. It'll be the first wine to come out from Europe to have a 2020 label on it, basically, and so that's why they do it, really, just to say, okay, this is the new wine that's out from Europe. Obviously, wines from South America and the Southern Hemisphere will have their 2020 vintages out earlier because of the way that their season goes. But yeah, it's just a fun thing to do, I think, really.
And it's still carried on, is it?
Yeah. Still a big thing. Still a big thing every year. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember when vaguely it must have been about the 1980s, if I'm not mistaken, that this first started to get into a race that brought it to the public's attention.
I don't know. I was only born in the late 1990s, so I haven't a clue on the history of it.
Oh, you poor soul! You poor soul! You missed the start of the race from Beaujolais Nouveau.
Yeah. I'm not sure on the history of it all, but
yeah. All right, you better look that up, my boy. Does this affect your business? Will you be looking at later in the year, sort of getting in a new vintage quickly, or are you just solid? Keep up the standards.
Yeah, it's just at that time of year we already have our sort of Christmas wines in stock, and so whether it might be an introduction or not is just purely based on the time, really, and if I can get some, or if suppliers can get some. I've not seen over the last couple of Christmases though any particular interest in it or requests from customers to get the new stuff. So yeah, it might just be a one-off thing, but it's something you don't really plan, to be honest with you. So you just sort of, there are other more important factors that play, or there's not really the hype or the demand. So yeah, I'm sure there is in some London bars somewhere where probably they are participants in the race. It might be a more influential factor, but yeah, not for us really.
Right, let's switch a little bit to what's happening this weekend. And according to the papers, and I'm quite sure that it's telling the truth there, because you can't hide this sort of thing, is that the airports are in absolute chaos. That flights aren't taking off, they're being cancelled, delayed, you name it. And it doesn't matter which airline it is. I think EasyJet has taken the brunt of it because it's a very popular, cheap airline. But what's your view on this sort of situation? Have you got any feel for why we've suddenly hit this once again another crisis?
Well, I read this in the Times this morning, and I have a couple of friends that were let go or decided to leave their job from from being, say, an air hostess or an air waitress, and other things like that. And so I think it's just the big airline companies releasing too many staff during the pandemic, despite the support that they had from the government, and then they come back post-pandemic, the offers or the contracts that they're giving out aren't as kind, or aren't as beneficial as they were before. So they haven't seen staff returning. To their jobs, basically, and so they're basically understaffed and can't put on as many flights as possible because of the staffing problems, basically. Yeah,
right.
I think that's it.
Is this purely a passenger thing, or I mean, a lot of the old wines you bring in from overseas, is it this sort of thing going to affect your business?
I think it's purely a passenger thing, just from reading it, because a lot of wine is shipped via boats and stuff like that. So, because it is expensive to fly it by air, and also wine it's not really needed. It's not like a banana. It's not going to perish as quick as it's not a highly perishable good. So it can be something that can be shipped out relatively slowly. So yeah, I think it's just a purely passenger sort of focus thing. This is.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
All right. How are you?
All right. We just had a gentleman come storming in here. Who are you?
Wow, what's just happened?
You what? Sorry.
Has something just happened? Who's?
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. It's all right.
That's all right. We just wanted to have a chat to you. This is what you have to put up with from now on, because we like people wandering through the premises and just coming in and getting involved in what goes on. We had some very, very interesting people a couple of weeks ago when you were away. A lady and gentleman came in for an elderly couple came in for a drink, and she was from New Zealand and he was from the United States. And I called across to them, "Do you want to come on TV?" And they said, "Oh yeah." And they came in and sat and had a very nice, cozy chat with us. But it was interesting that her job is house sitting, and she goes around the world to, in this case, somebody in Lewis who went away, wanted their house looked after for an extended period, say 2 or 3 months, and didn't want to leave the house empty. But also they have dogs, and apparently even do you have dogs?
I do. I've got 2. Yeah.
Right. So you'll be aware of how expensive it is that if you go away and you want to leave them in a dog nursery or a dog home, just for your away, it's very, very expensive. So she throws in the fact that she looks after the people's dogs as well, and they find that very cost effective, and they more or less say, "Listen, here's the key to the wine cellar. Help yourself." But we several people that we've had on are totally new to Lewis, don't know it at all, and it's interesting that they find it still I hate to use the word, but a cute place. As, oh my God, we didn't know that a place like this existed. Do you get that from your either clients or people that you do business with outside if they come to Lewis?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, whenever I describe where I live, it's always been like I live near Brighton or something like that, because it's just a better point of interest in Sussex. So, but yeah, basically, yeah.
Tell me this. I mean, talking about this area, we have a number of local vineyards. Now, how subject are they to everything that's happened to a lot of businesses in the pandemic? Are we going to lose any of these vineyards? Are they having difficulty delivering their stock? Are they having difficulty looking after the stock? What's the general scene in the local wine industry?
I wouldn't. I'm not too sure, to be honest with you, but I can't imagine. Well, given that there's such an interest in English wine at the moment, or there's more of a trend, I can imagine that a lot of them are sort of doing quite well off this recent trend and recent hype that English sparkling wine is getting, basically. So yeah, because a lot of places are being bought up by champagne houses and other things like that. And I think probably with the Jubilee knocking around, it's probably done okay for them now. Obviously, with cost of various things going up, it will be a factor, but I think they'll just pass it on to consumers at the end of the year, basically. So it's one of those.
So there's no feeling of crisis in the wine industry?
Not unless you have a very bad. Well, I guess the year that's just gone by, it's very dependent, because all a vineyard within it. If you run your own vineyard, you basically put in your eggs in one basket. That you hope to have a good year, basically, or a good vintage, so you can produce enough wine and then sell enough wine. to then cover the costs for the year and then cover the costs of you living. So rather than beer, you can produce that every single week, and sort of that can be a bit more consistent, because it's basically you do the same formula over again and again and again. Whereas a wine, you've got you prepare the whole year, and if you say have a bad couple of weeks in the most critical time of the year around September, then everything could go to diddly squat, really, and you lose a lot of it. But then there's also diseases that crops can get because of certain conditions and other things like that. So yeah, last year was, I know, a tricky time for wine growers around the Sussex area or the southeast area because of the not ideal conditions. There's a lot of powdery mildew, which is sort of like a fungal disease that vines can get, which affected crops and therefore yields, and therefore the amount of wine you can then produce from that. And so it's very much dependent on it. I'm sure there were a number of vineyards that probably did suffer from that, or probably were on their last legs, but you never know, really.
But I mean, as I understand it, is that we, as you say, the popularity of English wines is that sort of hedge funds and that sort of thing are now investing in English wines. Mm-hmm. Whereas I remember when I first came to Lewis, and I was asked to do a little feature for the company I was working for in London on English wines. And there is in those days there was an English wine festival which took place at Drusilla's Corner, the wine centre there. And actually, I mean, as I recall, English wines were struggling to make their mark, and were actually suffering to some extent from EU regulations, which said, if you have this sort of vine, you're okay. If you have this sort of wine, we can't give you the stamp of approval and all that sort of stuff. So is all that nonsense disappeared now?
Yeah, I guess so. I think so. Obviously, technology gets better. As vines get older, they become the wine that is produced becomes better. Obviously, can grow in conditions with because of global warming and other things like that are more favourable for the English market. You're more likely to have a better crop. Better crops grown, basically, or better grapes grown. But then it's all down to the skill and the craft of the winemaker itself as well. So you can still, even if you have the best year, if the winemaker's rubbish, then you're going to make a rubbish wine. But if a good winemaker can make a decent wine out of a poor crop, then it's just the skill of the winemaker at the end of the day. And I think with certain institutions like Plumpton getting more and more support and getting more prestige, the standard of winemakers within the country has gone up massively. So yeah.
It seems to me that in those days, that the way that they were commercially viable is that the people who came and picked the grapes were paid in bottles of wine.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still done?
It is. Yeah. Oh wow, they're probably paid, and then probably also get the bottles of wine as well as a thank you, as an extra thank you. So I'm sure, people will probably want to be paid more now. So than they would if wine.
Yeah, I mean it is a cash business now, as far as you're aware.
I'd assume so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I always fancied owning I've got a running joke at the moment with a friend here. She noticed a chateau in Languedoc, which I think is a pretty famous wine-making region in France, is it not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's going for just 1.2 million. And it's a huge chateau. And I said certainly I would put my tuppence into any consortium that wanted to go, as long as it had got a vineyard attached, So she's busy trying to find out whether it's got a vineyard attached. But she said, but that means that we'd have to pay salaries. And I said, no. It's the pickers are paid in bottles of wine. But now, since you say that perhaps times have changed from the 1990s, is you might have to put a budget figure in for the wine growers. You've destroyed my dream. I think Languedoc is a long way away. Tell me, I mean, the whole industry was thrown into chaos, I suppose, is when they got the EU ruling that, for instance, champagne can only be called champagne if it comes from the Champagne region and so on. But how some wines have the name of the vineyard, and other names have come from a region, like Languedoc. Is how do you wade your way through? If you're an average person interested in wines, how do you wade your way through identification of what it is that you're buying?
Well, labeling in the wine is very important, and sort of has been designed to help the consumer as well make their decision when buying wine. So when, for instance, the example that you've given, let's say it's from the Côte de Rhône, for instance, it's got certain levels of quality from there. So it will start off at the Côte de Rhône, its general name of the region, and that means a wine can be produced, isn't from a notable area, and it can be produced from wherever within that region. So there's no real marked quality behind it. And then it goes up to, say, Côte de Rhône villages, which would be a certain number of villages within the Côte de Rhône region, which have a notable success and a notable quality above that sort of Côte de Rhône label. And then it would go up to name-specific villages as well, say like Châteauneuf-du-Pape, which we all know is a very famous village. And the quality there is marked. It's a marked difference from everything else. And then above that, it would go to certain... I'm not sure it applies in the Côte de Rhône region, but within, say, Provence or Bordeaux, where the actual names of the estates or the names of the vineyards themselves are given such status that they are exceptional, basically. And it's an indicator and helps the consumer just to say, okay, this is the best of the best, or this actually comes from a single estate which has very notable. It produces exceptional wine year after year, and has been given such status by the French Viticulture Federation, or whatever it's called. Yeah.
Tell me, the quality of wine is sometimes. I mean, what we might well say is that we have a claret. What does that embrace? What does a claret embrace in red wines?
Well, claret is just the name of Bordeaux wines, basically, and it's also a colour. So I'm not sure what your question would be, basically.
Well, I mean, if I buy, or even if I'm just in a restaurant or something, and I say a red wine, and they say we have claret, what does that mean exactly?
Well, if they say that, then you go, okay, we have a claret which is from Bordeaux. Would you like to try that? It would be, if it was from that region, it can be it's most likely either going to be medium to full-bodied. It should be pretty decent because it comes from the Bordeaux region, and so then you go, okay, see how much it costs. If you can afford it, then you go and buy it, and it tastes nice. And if you can't, then move on to something else.
But if, for instance, they say we don't have claret, but we have, what are they likely to say they've got?
As an alternative, you can say we've got a Malbec from the Jura region, or you could even go, say, to the Languedoc as another good example. You probably could stretch to like Tuscan wines as well, wines from Tuscany, especially super Tuscans, because they sort of base their wines off Bordeaux blends. And then you're sort of looking at other wines that would have, say, the Bordeaux varieties in them. So you're looking at wines from which would have Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Malbec, and other things like that, basically. So yeah.
Right. Now, on top of that, we now have, and you deal with these third world wines.
Mm-hmm.
So if in fact I come to you and I say, could you provide me with a Brazilian wine, let's say, or a Chilean wine? I'm very partial to a Chilean wine, similar to a claret. What would you say to me?
Yeah, I'd say that'd be fine. Yeah, I wouldn't mind that.
But what you recommend to me? Because presumably, as you say, claret is from a distinct area in France.
Mm-hmm.
So how would I, when I come back to you, what would I be ordering? What terms would I use to get the sort of wine that I wanted from Chile?
I guess, well, if you wanted a wine from Chile, then you probably ask, have you got any Carmenere? Would be a classic example. Like Cabernet Sauvignon, like I said, Chile's very famous for that. So again, it was brought over a lot of grapes that are grown in Chile that and are famous are usually from the Bordeaux region, because they're brought over by the French and the Spanish and other things like that. So Carmenere is a Bordeaux variety. Merlot is also one. Cabernet Sauvignon is also another, and they all grow very well over in Chile. So Chile's a good substitute to Bordeaux wines, basically. Yeah.
Now, also on the menu, on the wine list, I noticed something that says a blend. What are blended wines?
Blended wines are where there's more than one variety that make up the wine. So, like, again, let's stick with Bordeaux, because all of Bordeaux wines, or a lot of Bordeaux wines, are a blend, basically, of a number of varieties. So it's just where wines has basically, let's say, Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon in different proportions or in the same proportions, and they're just put together, basically.
So if I have my little vineyard attached to my chateau in Languedoc, and I get a decent crop, how would it be blended? Where do I send it, rather than selling it as a pure wine at the doors of my estate?
Well, you could, if you had the facilities on your estate, you could blend the wine there yourself. If you had the facilities, if you can pick the wine in, then you're most likely, and you can have the technology, or if you can vinify it and blend it there and then. But if not, I'm sure there is, given the region that it is, there's someone on your doorstep that will do that for you at another winery, perhaps, or at a local cooperative that they could help out, basically. Yeah.
Now, how are wines bottled? For instance, if you buy, let's say, Pepsi Cola in, let's say, Northern Ireland, for the sake of argument, it would come through something that is called Coca-Cola bottlers. Now, is wine much the same? You have bottling plants that take these wines and bottle for various manufacturers?
Yeah, absolutely there are. Yeah, but then again, if you've got the facilities to do everything there at your vineyard, you can do it there yourself. It would go through a similar process to, say, the Coca-Cola bottling company, how they would do it. Just go through a bit of technology that would squirt the wine into the bottle, and then you'd bottle it there on site. Yeah. So I'm sure that it would be a little bit, it'd be sort of half baking a cake, basically, if you pick the grapes, then you fermented it, and then you've got to then send it off to somewhere else. You might as well invest in the whole technology there and there on site, because it probably saves on cost, a lot of cost down the line. So
yeah. So if I go to the, let's forget the supermarkets a moment. If I go to a local vintner and I look at the range of wines that he's got, where has he purchased his bottles from?
I haven't a clue, to be honest with you. I have not a clue.
But I mean, you actually deal with an ex-company to bring in your wines. Do you deal with the vineyard itself, or a central point, or where do you get your wines from?
I use two specialist wholesalers, basically, or two specialist wine, wholesalers that sort of do most of the legwork for me, basically.
Right. Yeah. So the wholesalers, they would be fairly large organisations.
Yeah. Yep.
So they go off and they buy their wine from the individual vineyards, or
yeah, they would do, or they would use other agencies as well that perhaps represent a group of vineyards within the area, just to help with distribution. So yeah, there's various ways that it sort of works, really. But a lot of them perhaps have buyers from certain regions that specialize in that, often sort of master of wines, and they'll go out searching for vineyards and other things like that, and try and establish connections and relationships like that. But yeah, agencies are another big thing. Just because, especially if you're a small vineyard and it's, say, you only yourself and your partner, it's quite a lot of legwork to
Good morning.
get the whole hustle and bustle about your vineyard, basically.
And the innovation that's come in is instead of cork, we've now got screw cap.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Just because it's in theory, well, it is actually a better way of preserving a wine, or making sure the wine doesn't get oxidized, basically.
Right.
Just because that sort of plasticky or foamy seal inside of it just sort of creates a better seal than cork, which does allow air or little elements of air to sort of get through.
Any difference in quality, whether it's screw cap or cork?
No difference in quality, I'd say. You might get, you will get flavors potentially they should both age fairly well, but you might get different flavors from one to the other, depending on if you age it for a long time, depending on whether it's a screw cap or a cork. Probably more likely you're going to get more intense to oxidized notes from a cork than a screw cap. But yeah, as long as it tastes good at the end of the day, then that's all that matters. What you don't want is a corked wine, or a wine that's gone off, basically. So yeah, as long as it's stored correctly.
The last time we chatted, you said that you were bringing in wine from a small vineyard that had basically said to the local worthies who rate the wine is bugger off, and we're actually going to call this wine, I can't remember, was it illegal or?
It was called illegal, yeah.
Oh, my memory. So what is that row all about? The local region don't like wines leaving them unless they've got their stamp of approval. Is that right?
So how it works is, again, it goes back to labeling, and if a wine region, just so that it can represent a certain standard of quality to the consumer, and it has a label on it saying it's grown from this region, the governing body or within that region knows that there are X amount of varieties that do grow really well in here if it lives up to a certain standards that wine growers have to do. have to abide by. But then wine growers are becoming more and more experimental, and in particular, this one has tried growing it from, I think it's the Mourvèdre variety, which isn't allowed in the Languedoc region, and so under the classification of the wine, well, for the wine classified under Languedoc status. And so he said, okay, well, if I think I can grow it, but you guys aren't accepting it, then I'll just label it under Vin de France, basically, which is sort of table.
But there's no legislation that says that if I want to sell my wine that I've grown on the little few grapes in my backyard, that I can't do that.
No.
I can do that.
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah.
Right. If I can tell you just a little story, because I haven't spent a lot of time in Albania, but on the one occasion we went to the second largest town, which is called Skodra. And in Skodra, there was one traffic light, so it tells you the second largest town how large it was. And we found a rather nice restaurant, and we sat outside, and God bless them, it was the year of a World Cup, and all the waiters were inside watching the World Cup, and were really quite peed off that we were sitting outside asking for wine. But the wine came from a local vineyard, and it was served in plastic Coca-Cola bottles. So presumably they just sort of collected old Coca-Cola bottles, put their wine in it, and that's how they delivered it.
I guess so. Yeah, it sounds like it. Sounds like a good story.
Well, the other story is that it was very hot and very dusty, and the owner of the restaurant made one of his men stand by our Jeep with a hose to hose all the dust off. And boy, was he fed up with the fact that he couldn't watch the football. Yeah. And you could hear the roars of the people inside the restaurant as they watched this football. So he was not a happy bunny. Yeah. Okay, thanks for answering those questions, because I think one of the things that is a funny thing about wine, it brings out the snobbishness in people. And they use terms, and they don't really know what the hell they're talking about. And I mean, how many times have you seen somebody who asks to taste the wine and then sends it back without any idea why they're sending it back? I mean, you know, the taste would be different. And I think getting through the mystery of it, to get it down to a brass tacks, is rather useful for a lot of people. Those who pretend that they know and don't, and those that have no idea and would like to know. So that's very helpful, Fergus, and I appreciate that. And perhaps as we develop your program in the coming weeks and months, is you might think of giving little tips and hints about what to look for if you're going into a restaurant. And to find out the sort of wine that you want. I mean, it's easy to say this one is £20 a bottle and this one's only £5 a bottle, and rating it that way. But I don't think it always works quite that way, does it?
No, because, well, yeah, the economics of wine is quite an interesting one. But yeah, it's especially if you're going to say, let's take that example and say the £5 bottle of wine is from a large producer who benefits from economies of scale, and therefore the overall cost goes down. But if that £20 bottle of wine is one of, say, 5,000 bottles produced, and that's the cost that's the price it needs to sell for them to break even for this tiny little producer, then that's the price that they got to sell it at, basically.
Yeah. But it may be the quality is no different. I
mean, it could very well be.
A bottle of wine isn't necessarily just cheap.
Exactly. We could say so. Let's say that, especially if they're, say, next door to one another. Literally, the vineyards are next to one another. One's massive, one's little. It's sort of David and Goliath a little bit, but yeah.
Right. Okay. Now, I always like to give you a chance to push your own business. So, remember that in our business in television is you can say something one week, and then people make a basic assumption that it's remembered the next week, which is far from the truth. You have to say things a dozen times. So don't worry if you repeat yourself, but give us a little roundup of your business, how it's going, and how people get wines from you.
So my business is called Camino del Vino, which is spelled CAMINODELVINO, and it stands for Wine Path in Spanish. And we try and look for uncommon and interesting wines around the wine world, and trying to introduce you to novel wines and trying to help you develop your palate, basically. We like to have a bit of fun with things, so we've always got a lot of interesting varieties on there, as well as regions and countries you didn't even think produced wines. And you can find us online at www.caminodelvino.co.uk, or you can look at our social media, where we have lots of fun educational videos on our Instagram at CaminoDelVino_, basically. And yeah, you can get in contact. It's just a one-man band. It's myself, and especially with the weather making a turn for the better and other things like that, it's rosé season and a lot of barbecues being lit, so that a lot of wine is going out the door for those sort of stuff. We have a beautiful rosé on at the moment called the Marie Christine, which comes from a very prestigious winery within the region of Provence, of the Côte de Provence, which, yeah, it's fantastic. So yeah.
Do you get to go to any of these vineyards?
Haven't yet, but I hopefully plan to over the summer, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know for a fact that from the times that you've been in the studio, that you do have a little slurp yourself to check these things out.
When we're doing our film, when we used to do our filming in there, yeah, we tried stuff, didn't we? Yeah. Well, it was part of the program, wasn't it? Yeah. So
yes. Well, I mean, we, as you know, we're coming from the White Hart now. We hope to persuade you, perhaps not every week, but say once every 3 weeks, to perhaps bring some wines down here and do something similar here live. We try to do everything live because it's nice to see the interaction of people. And in you doing that, somebody may well come in and say, "What are you doing?" And you say, "Here." And it makes the interaction. So it's taken us a little time to develop this, and it's beginning to work quite well now. So I'm ready to talk to you about doing that if you're willing to do it. And perhaps we're quite willing to flog some off the telly, as it were, on the day. So you bring your order forms.
Yeah.
Right, Fergus. Anything in the future with you that we should keep an eye on? I mean, I did. I mean, you know, are you going to get married? Because I met a beautiful lady with you who looked at you with adoring eyes.
Yeah.
I suppose you should, handsome young man.
Hopefully one day. Yeah.
Be a bit cautious.
Yeah.
Thanks for being with us. It's terrific to talk to you, and I'm so glad that things are going well for you, because I know that it was an act of faith that you actually got cracking, got involved, and you're doing very well. And you know, people are, hopefully with a little bit of help from us, but people are aware of you now, and that you know, one day that we'll be sitting here and we'll be talking to Mr. Millionaire.
Hopefully, I'd hope so too as well. That'd be great.
You wouldn't say no to a buck or two.
Definitely not.
We'll talk soon. Thank you very much for being with us.
Cheers, Keith. Thank you. Have a good one. Enjoy your bank holiday.
Indeed, I will.
Cheers.
Thanks, Fergus.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Fergus Wood, a delightful young man. It's now 10:48. 49 now. In other words, pretty close to 10 to 11. I think that what we're finding is that unless there is a lot of traffic in the hotel, shutting down the morning session at 11 o'clock is quite beneficial, and then we don't bore you to death. But by the same token, also, is quite often what we found is something start to happen about 11 o'clock, and we don't want to cut off our nose to spite our face. So let us just go back then to the front pages. And one of the things that is perhaps getting up my nose is, well, there are two things that get up my nose, actually. One is that the political classes are so far up their backsides is that they've lost all touch with reality. I have stuff being stuffed into my mailbox at the moment, and essentially what they're really saying is we can get rid of the Tories for you. Help us get rid of the Tories. I don't want to know that because I don't think that one political party is any better than the rest. In fact, probably most of them are worse than the ones that we've got. What bothers me is that none of them are really giving us positive philosophies or policies. They're not saying this is what we would do. It's just get rid of. And that creates a vacuum. What is happening in those vacuums is if you create a vacuum, it is your responsibility it's your responsibility, not that you have to do it, is to actually fulfill it. And I don't see much of an offer from anybody, including the rebels within the Conservative Party, that are doing much except saying we can get rid of, which is a very, very negative way of looking at things. So I wish that they would stop that type of lobbying, of campaigning. I want to know, what is it that you would do as a group or as an individual? Not that you can get rid of people doing stuff that apparently they're failing at and they're not having such a good time at. So that's really bothering me. And the fact that there are groups now within the Conservative Party that want to get rid of Boris, and he can be a bit toxic, I agree. But I thought that on the world stage that he showed his worth. And in the long run, whether we like it or not, the war in Ukraine is one of the key things on the world stage that we have to deal with. So I am not at all happy personally. And as you know, the mouth that roars is I'm not shy about saying what's upsetting me. So these people who are trying to get rid of Boris, unless they're actually going to show me and demonstrate to me, and out of that, convince me that their policies will be helpful to me, to the country, and to the way that they operate. They can say no to anything that comes up from me. The Daily Mail, which we've just gone through, but they steer away from £1,000 or £100 tank of fuel issue. But they do point out that every time there is a breakdown of a lorry or whatever, it impinges on the EU itself, and when we were members of the EU, upon ourselves. So I wish, if I have a druther, is to have politics reviewed. I don't like politics the way it is at the moment. It is 9 times out of 10, it's not even. Their policies aren't even to get half decent places, and to make the country and for that matter, the world, a better place. They don't do it. And if we're looking at things in that light, they should. Right. Okay. Right. The Daily Mail, in fact, is not calling for a wholesale change in our leadership, provincial or national. What it's saying is save us from the £100 tank of fuel and the rising cost of fuel. But it is pointing out that now it is very, very expensive, and it's saying to Rishi Sunak, will you please start to think in terms of how you can help people who are finding the cost of living rising huge. It's just that they are focused on the petrol crisis. That's where they would actually see what they could do. So it looks as if you're heading for the £100 tank of petrol. The Daily Telegraph is what's its headline? What's its front page? It says, police leave 999 callers hanging. And the paper claims that police forces are routinely failing to answer 999 calls within target times. In the wake of the wake of the increase is the £100 gallon of petrol. And it's not, I've mixed the two stories up, is that we are not getting the emergency services that we demand and which the government has set. The police are funny organisations, really, because they're part state and part locally owned by vineyard owners, businesses, and so on. So if in fact this delay is a question of be careful, then so much the better for them. Okay, let's go to the next one. The financial stuff I'm going to skip. I've been a financial journalist in the past. I didn't totally understand what the hell it was talking about. So I'm not in a very good position to interpret for you what it means. So I should just leave that. The Sun is it is diving for cover. It does. Whenever there's anything controversial about Boris, it dives for cover. And it's got a story about Andy Carroll, the English footballer, and how he was either turned down or not turned down, as the case may be, from some lady when he was out and about as a famous man. And that ends. So Andy Carroll didn't score. That's. I think I must have missed some papers out. Did I? No, I started off the Metro at the Times. Basically, is Boris must go is the theme of some papers, and the other is the chaos at the airport is spoiling everybody's getaway, and getting away in these little mini breaks, particularly after such a time, is not a bad thing. but whether you should lift it in full view of the entire.
Yes, I know. Yes, that is. Right, I'm going to make the way.
All right. Let's just now take a look at what we may have. We'll take a look at our video file and see what we might have of interest. And while I'm doing that, I'm actually going to play. It's time for us to take our morning break, isn't it? It is, because it's 11 o'clock and we're almost through with the show this morning. So let's go down to Grange Park, which we normally do when my mouth gets dry, which it is, and see what it has to say. That's a lovely park. And actually, I realize that what we're doing with this little clip is reinventing the potter's wheel. 90% of people watching this program, in fact, 90% of the population wouldn't really know what we were talking about when we talk about the potter's wheel. But when television started way back in it started in the 1930s, but it had to be delayed then because of the war. When it started to come back as a form of communication in everybody's drawing room, the programs were uneven. You would have a program on a quiz show, and it might run for sort of 35 minutes as opposed to the required 30. And then another one would only run for 24 minutes. And to be able to justify these, they had a series of little programs, I suppose, educational programs. One was London to Brighton in 4 minutes. And they'd put a camera in front of a train and run it at slow motion out of Victoria. And it showed the train zipping along and the stations that it went through and so on. And it was immensely popular. One of them, these fillers, if you like, was called the potter's wheel. And all we saw was a pair of hands taking a blob of clay and making it into a vase or a jar or something of the sort. And it was affectionately known as the potter's wheel. They had all sorts of other little vignette type things, but I can't remember most of them. I must look them up because they were delightful little bits and pieces. So the Southover Park is becoming our potter's wheel. You see it regularly, and what it does is it just covers a multitude of sins. Anything else that I think that we should share with you? Well, Shall we? We'll take it since I'm likely to become a forager. Whoops. Yeah, the Grange Park, or our Potter's Wheel. It's, let's just see if there's something that we it's 11:04, and we will keep going for a little bit longer. It would be nice to end on a nice theme, as it were, and it's trying to find stuff. Because this is badly catalogued, I'm afraid. Basically, because it's my catalogue. But let's see what we might have in the way of a program, just to keep you amused. Yeah. Oh well, actually, that's silly, because what I should do is first of all, no, I'll show this afterwards. We should watch a program now, because later this week we've got the Jubilee, and I've accused other people of ignoring it. I mustn't do it myself. Well, that should be me. There we go. Yes, there we go. We're back with you. Now, this is the local one that is on sale. I was in the precinct Saturday very briefly, and I saw Mick Symes, who's been very involved with it, flogging it like crazy. It's £3. You can get it from various stores. And he was saying that there is some merchandise coming in. And in fact, he planned to come on with it. Whether in fact I can arrange that because I'm not here tomorrow. I'm going to have a cataract removed from my eye. So one of the things that we have to keep an eye on is when we can promote some of this stuff. But I suppose really the merchandise for the Jubilee is saleable all year long. It's just that the push comes in this exciting week. We're into day 2 of this exciting week. Tomorrow is Jubilee Eve, if you like, and then Thursday and Friday, wherever you are in the country, there's going to be exciting things. I don't know that we've got a street party here, but there are something like 3,000 street parties that have been sanctioned by the palace, and that the future King William, and I'm not quite sure which other members of the royal family are actually going to sit down with groups of people and have fish-based sandwiches and cucumber sandwiches and jelly and trifle. And are they? I doubt it. I think that these tea parties will now follow the modern trend, and that we will see a different type of street party. But in those days, way back in 1952, those street parties were quite something. And they were organized by a very different social structure that we have today. Although, having said that, I mean, there are people that in one of the roads, I think it may be New Road, and a couple of the roads down towards the paddock, who are always very good at organizing. They get together as a group. They seem to have a good social structure. They get together as a group, and they put on quite often a street party or whatever. And I've actually walked through when they're getting ready for it, and it's a joy to see. And as a consequence, we may well see fish-based sandwiches coming back. Good morning. How are you this morning?
Good, you?
Not too bad, thank you. There's a gentleman just wandered into the bar, looked around, and perhaps meeting some friends. So we are seeing our way through now to 12 minutes past 11. And I think that the time has come for us to say toodle pip. Just a reminder of what's on the newspaper's agenda today. And that is that there is absolute travel chaos at the airlines, the airports. And according to most commentators, it's getting worse, not better. Could it be avoided? Well, the thing is that we quite often very sagely have said life is not going to be the same after lockdown. Well, life is probably not going to be the same after lockdown. And in fact, it isn't. But I don't think that anybody had envisaged this very remarkable situation, exacerbated by war, but not totally the result of it, is that the official figures show that we have virtually zero unemployment in this country at the moment. But we don't have anybody who's at work. And we have lots of organizations and services claiming that they can't provide a proper service because they haven't got enough workers. What an anomaly. And somebody somewhere, I think, I better start to explain that to me and explain that to you before we actually give way to saying it is nobody's fault. It is nobody's fault. Huh. How many times have we heard that? But hiding behind a nonsensical system makes it worse, not better. Okay, it's 11:14. I'm going to say toodle pip. Thank you for being with me. I hope you found that Fergus's little trip through the mysteries of the drinking and choosing of wines was useful. And let's hope that we soon will have wine back on the table that is of a reasonable price. Wine actually hasn't gone up that much, but it's like everything else. It's subject to foodstuffs, and particularly since the transport is going to become a tough one, with the RMT still talking about a strike. Not much of an argument, really, but still treating about a strike. That we will probably feel the pinch even there. So we have to be very careful and treat the other things, the supporting things, as well as we can. Keep that music in the garden. Let's end the broadcast. I'd forgotten to do that. No, let's go out with protocol. Let's go out with protocol.